News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moskow.
Karen, it's day 10 of the war with Iran. Once again, there is little sign of let-up on either side. The U.S. and Israel continue to launch heavy airstrikes on Tehran, while Iran is attacking Israel and Arab Gulf states regularly with drones and missiles. Iran says it can keep up this level of fighting for at least 6 months. But Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says at some point Iran will surrender.
We're not flying a mission accomplished banner like George W. Bush on an aircraft carrier. We're not doing that, and we haven't done that. But we can be clear with the American people that this is not a fair fight, and that's on purpose. Our capabilities are overwhelming compared to what Iran's are.
In an interview on CBS's 60 Minutes, heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said President Trump will set the terms of Iran's surrender. But former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides, says it's important to take a step back.
We have to understand what the objectives of this is. How do we determine what success is? I'm not sure success is necessarily, quote, regime change, but one will have to debate that. And I do believe Congress has a role here, guys. I think it's important for us to understand that.
Former U.S. Ambassador to Israel Tom Nides was a guest on our news show, Bloomberg This Weekend. In the meantime, the U.S. has ordered non-essential diplomats in Saudi Arabia to leave. That's after a U.S. service member wounded in an attack over the weekend died overnight, bringing the U.S. death toll to 7. Iran says more than 1,300 people have died in U.S. and Israeli strikes so far. Sources tell Bloomberg News that President Trump is considering a special forces ground operation to seize Iran's enriched uranium. That's on growing concerns it may have been moved. President Trump says that's something he could do later on, but he's not considering it right now.
Well, Nathan, Iran is signaling no let-up to the war after naming the Hardline son of the assassinated Ayatollah Ali Khamenei as its new supreme leader. 56-year-old Moskow Khamenei has deep ties to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. Bloomberg senior editor Wendy Benjaminson says the decision was not a surprise.
This was the man that the U.S. really expected would take over for his father. It's the first generational succession since the 1979 revolution. And he seems to be the kind of guy who will continue in his father's footsteps in every way.
And Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson, President Trump told Fox News he was unhappy with Moskow Khamenei's appointment.
Well, Karen, oil has smashed through $100 a barrel this morning as the war rages on. Checking NYMEX crude right now, it's up nearly 14% at $103.36 per barrel. Brent is up 15% at $106.62. The price was even higher earlier, but talks on a coordinated release of reserves took some heat out of the market. Stephen Stepchinski leads Bloomberg's team covering energy in Asia.
I think some of the worrying things that happened over the weekend is the retaliatory strikes from Iran continued. It did not look like there was any easing of tension. In fact, it looked like it was getting worse. The U.S. wasn't showing like it's going to back down, especially rhetoric coming out of the White House and from Trump himself. And then on top of that, you had some major producers. You had Kuwait, and you also had ADNOC looking to adjust or lower their oil production because their inventories are getting high as they can't export the fuel.
Bloomberg's Stephen Stepchinski says the group of 7 finance ministers will discuss a possible joint release of oil from their reserves today. President Trump says $100 oil is a, quote, small price to pay for world safety and peace.
Well, Nathan, oil's not the only thing on the move this morning. We're seeing a big sell-off in stocks around the world, and Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us with the very latest. John, good morning.
And Karen, U.S. stock futures down over 1%. Japan's Nikkei plunged 5% this morning, sending that market into correction. Global bonds, they continue to sell off, so that's pushing yields even higher. About $6 trillion of market value has now been erased from global stocks since the war in Iran began. Investors are pricing in a deeper and longer-lasting supply shock. This is one that could squeeze growth while reigniting inflation, what we know as stagflation. The dollar has emerged as the haven asset of choice, with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up almost 2% since the war began. Now, that adds to cost pressure since oil is priced in dollars. And Helen Jewell of BlackRock says the war introduced more unwelcome obstacles for investors.
Uncertainty about the Fed path which we didn't have just a few weeks ago.
Well, expectations for Federal Reserve interest rate cuts have already been pared back. And veteran strategist Ed Yardeni has raised the probability of a market meltdown. As he puts it, the U.S. economy and stock market are stuck between Iran and a hard place. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. There's another source of tension in New York City. Authorities are investigating potential terrorism linked to two suspects in custody of what Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch says was an improvised explosive device thrown near Mayor Zoran Mamdani's residence. Tisch says the device was thrown by a counter-protester during an anti-Islam demonstration.
Witnesses reported seeing flames and smoke as it traveled through the air before it struck a barrier and extinguished itself a few feet from police officers.
New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch says the confrontation unfolded outside Mayor Mamdani's home during a protest organized by far-right activist Jake Lang to, quote, stop the Islamic takeover of New York City.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moskow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.